Chess.com were calling this a candidate for the move of the year 2023. This is truly an incredible sacrifice by Vasyl Ivanchuk, and I've never in my entire life seen a sacrifice quite like this. So Ivanchuk was playing white here. He was playing against Jorden Van Foreest with black. So Ukraine versus the Netherlands in the FIDE World Team Championship event. And this was the pool stages. They've now gone to knockouts, and this is rapid play chess. Let's see what happened. So Ivanchuk kicks off with d4. Now we had d5 in response. c4's the Queen's Gambit, e6, knight c3. And now very commonly you see black going knight f6 there. I'm just going to move this mic back a bit. Knight f6, but here we see c5 played. So the Tarrasch defense. So we had takes on d5, pawn recaptured, and now this knight develops to f3. Black does similar, and now Chucky goes for a less common system here. So the main way for white to play is with pawn to g3. You can then fianchetto the bishop to g2, as I'm indicating here, and this dark squared bishop very often comes to the g5 square. Now I'm showing this because now e3 is played, and you'll see the computer giving that a question mark. It doesn't like blocking in this bishop, positionally speaking. That's why it doesn't love this system, but okay, it's still very solid. White keeps a small advantage. And now a6 was played. This is to prevent bishop to b5 here. That's why knight c6 wasn't played immediately. And now b3 prepares to bring this bishop out like this. So we had knight to c6 now, bishop to b2. And now here we see bishop to g4 played. If you take immediately on d4, then white's going to go with the knight and play against this isolated pawn long term. So we had bishop g4, which now prevents this knight from recapturing the pawn. And if, by the way, white takes here, which is playable, will now develop, black develops that dark squared bishop on the king side in one go. And so this is favourable. They build up a bit of an initiative in compensation for the isolated pawn. So bishop e2 was played instead. Now this one was captured. This is the idea. So that then when you capture, you force white to go with the pawn, and both players now have the isolated queen's pawn. The bishop came to b4. We now see both players castle, and now knight a4 was played. Logical idea, looking to bring the knight here and also opening the eyes of this bishop, especially if the knight lands on c5 and the bishop takes and the pawn recaptures. So rook e8 hits the open file. Now we see knight c5, and this is an interesting moment. If you play takes here at the wrong moment, then it's just a bad move, because after pawn recaptures, you open up this bishop, which was previously dead. Although this is the best way to play in the current position, my trusty assistant tells me, because then knight e4 is the follow-up here, and it's all about initiative for black in this position essentially. So the pawn is attacked, rook c1 looks very logical to defend it, and then there's this queen g5 move. Still holds this pawn from the attack of the white queen, but also now eyes this square, threatens to go knight to d2, forking these two pieces. So you can go rook c2, rook e1, say you go rook c2 to cover that one. Well, then black has moves like rook a to d8, or even rook e6 is quite aggressive. Again, black just gets that big initiative in compensation for the isolated pawn. That's the key thing to understand about these positions. You have to play actively if you've got that long-term worse pawn structure. So after knight c5, we didn't see the bishop capturing, but was technically best. We see b6 instead. Chucky drops back the knight, and now he's building up a bit of an initiative, because after the bishop drops back, we're soon going to see this knight landing on e5 with a vengeance. So rook c1 played, hits this unprotected piece. This rook defended, rook e1 hits the open file, and now the computer wants to take here first, the opening move. Instead, knight e4 was played. That's why it gets the question mark, exclamation mark here. Okay, but not such a bad move. Now rook e2, and after queen d7, we'll see the point of this rook e2 move. It now swings across to the c file here. And now Jorden goes wrong. He should go knight to b4 to start initiating exchanges, get a pair of knights off the board, trade some rooks, but instead he goes knight to f6, And now after g3, g6, both players just taking some time to improve the kings, we'll see some problems down the c file in the moment. So the bishop drops back to g2, and now rook c7 was played, again knight b4 best, and queen f1. So the whole idea is to set up this battery and bring the bishop to this deadly diagonal. And that's why rook e7 was now played, so that when the bishop comes, the queen can slide to e8. But this construction of pieces is not good for black, and Chucky now takes advantage by sinking this knight onto e5. Now already the tactics are flying, because it looks like black can just win a pawn by playing like this. But if you take straight away with the bishop and we trade everything off, then you've got a problem here. You lose this rook and you're completely lost. And if instead of doing this one, you take on c2 first as an in-betweener, well, now we recapture, bishop takes, and this time the problem, the sting at the end of the tail, is rook to c8 working with that bishop. This is the big problem. So running it back here, the knight on e5 is immune. That's why knight to b8 was now played, rerouting that one, trying to get some exchanges going, but Chucky carries on with another brilliant move here, but not his amazing one. He goes bishop to a3. So this bishop is just overloaded basically. If it takes on a3, then you capture on c7. Now if you take on c1 here, again we've got this problem of queen takes back. You've still got problems here. If this rook captures, the queen invades, much better for white. So there's just big problems, very hard to find the way through. Queen d8 was played by Jorden to defend this bishop rather than taking here. Very tactical, I know, but this is where Chucky plays his absolute brilliancy. Move of the year contender. Can you guess what he played in this position? So he slams down this knight onto the d7 square. Why is this such a phenomenal move? Well, that knight can be captured by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, but none of the captures are good for black. And that's what I've never seen before. A sacrifice where 5 separate pieces can capture the piece. If you've ever seen this, please do point me to the game. Really beautiful position. So after the knight lands on d7, well, let's analyze some of these captures. Now the rook captured in the game. Well, what happens if one of the knight captures? Well, now there's a problem with this rook on c7. It's not defended by this one. So say the bishop comes, well, now we take here. This is the problem. And how else can you capture? Well, if you go with the queen, you know you're losing your queen. Just none of the tactics are working. So that's what happens if one of the knight goes. Obviously, the queen can't take, or you lose it to the bishop. So in the game, we see the rook capturing, and now this is the follow-up from Chucky. He plays bishop takes on d6. So we see the rook capturing on c2. Again, if you do this, we do this. So we had takes here, rook recaptures, rook takes on d6, and again it's this rook c8, which is the problem. Once both rooks leave that back rank, the queen is really vulnerable. So the queen took, bishop recaptured, but this isn't the end of the story. It's a fascinating finish to this game. So the knight now came into c6. It's hard to defend this pawn. If you go a5, you can do it, but then queen b5 invades. Very uncomfortable. So Jorden goes for counterplay. Gives this pawn, but then captures this one. But this part of the game is great by Chucky. He first goes king g2, king g7. Now pawn to b4, takes some control of key squares. We see the knight coming to c2, hits this pawn, also frees the way for the d pawn to run. This is scary for white, but queen a4 picks up a vital tempo. The knight goes with check, king comes back, knight f3, and now queen d1 pressures this knight, dares its take on h2. This would be a blunder because after king g2, the knight's actually trapped. If you jump back here, well, now we're taking with the bishop. This is the problem, obviously supported by the queen, so you're winning a piece. So we didn't have takes on h2. Instead, we had knight e5 retreating and queen d4. So Chucky's achieved a lot. He's driven back those pieces, blockaded the pawn. He's got some pressure down towards the king. The knight came back to f3, but this is where Chucky now missteps. But it's very subtle. So he should go queen to e3. This covers the e1 square from any knight checks, so that after knight to e4, And by the way, this piece is now immune after knight e4, or then there's knight d2 check, winning the queen. Well, after knight e4, king g2, now there's no knight e1 check. The queen covers. This is the subtle thing. So this knight would have to retreat. I mean, it could come to d2 here. There's different moves, really. But okay, you have to kind of backpedal, go to inferior squares. That's why the queen's better on e3. But queen f4 was played, looks so natural, hitting this one, but knight e4 is such a powerful reply. As we mentioned, the knight's immune. You can't take the rook anymore, it's defended. So now when we have king g2 pressuring this knight, well, knight e1 check comes, the king goes, then the knight comes here, hits this queen, and after it moves away, well, now black picks up this pawn on f2. So this is the difference between the whole sequence. And suddenly, this is anyone's game. Check was played, king g8, and now again, Chucky just goes subtly wrong. b5 is best. Stops this rook from coming to c6, and if it comes back here to try and activate, well, then bishop b7 covers the square, and that bishop can come and sit on c6, cemented soon. There's pressure here and here, better for white. Instead, a4 was played, but now this rook can activate. Bishop a6, rook c1 check, the king goes here, and now knight g4 isn't the best move. The computer wants to start with rook d1, but okay, we won't analyse too deeply. The players are low on time, and h3 should be played here by Chucky, just to drive this knight back, something like this, and then he can bring this bishop back to the defence, or even take this pawn, try and get these ones running. Still very tactical. But bishop d3 was played, and this is a complete blunder, because rook d1 is a devastating response, pinning that bishop, and how do you actually unpin the queen? It's just impossible to do, because these knights are covering so many key squares. So a5 was played by Chucky. He tries to run those pawns. Rook d2 check, king g1, and now this knight jumps in, preparing to win this bishop, and there's nothing Chucky can do. But what he should do here is not take on d5. His best was something like this, to run those passed pawns. Yes, he loses a piece, but at least he can go h3, drive the knight, check, king goes, now pick up the pawn. Very subtly different position because you've driven back this knight here that was over on g4. But what we see in the game is takes on d5, and this is a straight blunder. Now we had check. The king comes to f1. If it comes here, you get mated in 1. So it goes over to f1. Now we see knight e3 check, and this is the whole problem with taking on d5. The queen is lost. King goes, check, king e2, the queen drops, and yes, the king takes here, but it's not enough because you get this follow-up check, king goes, you lose the bishop, and this was the final move of the game. Now, it's not double exclam, I just added that so I know where the end of the game was, but after the king recaptures, knight takes with check, king goes, pawn takes, okay, this is clearly lost, sample continuation of how the game would have ended. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Do you think it's the move of the year? Have you seen better? Please do let me know in the comments. And if you want to see the fascinating story of the Magnus Hans cheating scandal, then check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.